The forces currently deployed at the edge of the Persian Gulf aren't just battling external threats. They are navigating a crisis of purpose that is shaking the foundation of the modern military. This isn't just about tactical challenges in the 2026 theater of operations. It's about a documented shift in morale that is spreading through the ranks faster than the Pentagon can issue denials. From private messages sent back home to official statements surfacing in domestic military journals, a singular, heavy question is being asked. Why are we being asked to risk everything for a mission that no longer feels connected to our own national security? If you've been following the standard news cycles, you're only seeing the surface-level reports of troop movements and strategic posturing. But beneath the official narrative, there is a curiosity gap that the establishment is desperate to close. We have analyzed the internal data and the shifting sentiments of those on the front lines to reveal the real reason why this specific deployment has triggered such a massive internal reaction. Stay with us until the end of this breakdown, because the disconnect between the command center in Washington and the boots on the ground has reached a point of no return. Since the start of this year, the financial burden of this operation has already drained tens of billions from the national budget, but the institutional cost is even higher. For the first time in a generation, we are seeing high-ranking officers, not just new recruits, publicly questioning the viability of a ground operation. These are career professionals who are identifying a strategic failure in real time. They are warning that the current path isn't just difficult, it's structurally impossible to win. The check engine light for this entire campaign is flashing, and the leadership is currently choosing to ignore the warning. The phrase defining this descent across military circles is clear and direct. We do not want to sacrifice for interests that aren't our own. This goes beyond simple grumbling about a long deployment. It is a fundamental verdict on the mission's legitimacy. In just the last 6 weeks, the stated objectives for this conflict have shifted multiple times, ranging from energy security to regime change. When the goalposts move this rapidly, the psychological bond between a soldier and their mission fractures. Without a clear why, the motivation that a high-intensity conflict requires simply evaporates, leaving a massive void in capability. To understand why this internal break is happening now, you have to look at the motivation asymmetry on the battlefield. On one side, you have regional forces who view this as an existential fight for their homeland, drawing on years of history to fuel their resolve. On the other side, American personnel are seeing aircraft losses and mounting costs while their own territory remains untouched by the conflict. This lack of a direct connection to the safety of their own families at home creates a vacuum that no amount of official messaging or patriotic framing can fill. The specific reports now surfacing are not mere rumors. They are documented assessments from within the military infrastructure itself. Currently, a massive force of approximately 4,500 Marines and naval personnel is positioned toward the Persian Gulf under a cloud of unprecedented internal scrutiny. According to multiple military publications and independent analytical platforms, the mood among these forces is being described as pure frustration. This isn't the standard fatigue you find in every deployment. This is an organized, documented concern about being sent into what the personnel themselves are calling a high-casualty trap with no clear exit strategy or definition of victory. A commissioned officer, a senior leader with significant command responsibility, recently took the extraordinary risk of describing a potential ground operation as a tactical catastrophe. When an officer at that level allows such a devastating assessment to reach the public during an active deployment, it is no longer a simple leak. It is a desperate institutional warning. These leaders are witnessing the reality on the front lines. Drones are bypassing defenses, precision strikes are hitting logistical hubs, and the gap between the administration's public threats and the military's actual delivery is becoming a chasm that professionals can no longer ignore. Then there is the symbolic imagery that has become the digital center of this internal revolt. Visuals spreading across secure military communication channels that no official press briefing can neutralize. These images depict the deep-seated feeling that the sacrifice being demanded is disconnected from the values the troops swore to protect. Instead of traditional symbols of home or family, these shared graphics highlight the perceived influence of special interests and political figures over the lives of those in uniform. The message from the ranks is silent but unmistakable. The soldiers see exactly who is benefiting from this conflict, and it isn't the American people. Every successful strategic campaign in history requires one foundational element, a defined end state. This is a specific, achievable condition that, once reached, signals the mission is complete and the troops can return to their families. However, the current strategy in the Middle East lacks this entirely. The administration issued a 48-hour ultimatum regarding the Strait of Hormuz, which was met with silence. That deadline passed, the strategic waterway remains contested, and the promised results never materialized. This reveals a strategic paralysis that has left the boots on the ground in a dangerous state of limbo without a clear objective. This gap between political rhetoric and military reality is a strategic disconnect that is now impossible to deny. It can only be resolved in two ways: through a massive escalation that the troops themselves are warning against, or a diplomatic exit that no one in Washington has the courage to propose. As the funding requests for this operation surpass the $100 billion mark, the primary beneficiary of the campaign, in the eyes of the personnel actually fighting it, is a foreign government. This asymmetry of motivation has reached a breaking point that no official framing or media spin can repair. The international response to this escalation has only deepened the sense of isolation within the American military ranks. While the administration demands total loyalty, the historic NATO alliance is visibly fracturing. For the first time in decades, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain have all explicitly stepped back from the mission, refusing to endorse a war they were never consulted on. NATO has already begun pulling its tactical advisors from the Middle East theater, leaving American forces to wonder why they are standing alone. When the Secretary General of NATO can barely defend these actions to the press, the message to the troops is undeniable. This isn't just about Allied hesitation. It is a full-scale withdrawal from a conflict that the world's leading democracies do not believe in. The contrast between the two sides of the front line is now a major factor in military intelligence reports. Iranian soldiers and regional militias understand exactly what they are fighting for because they have seen the wreckage of previous regional conflicts. They are fighting for their existence, a quality of motivation that requires no mythology. On the other side, American soldiers are seeing aircraft losses and destroyed bases while their own territory remains at zero risk. The public rhetoric coming from the top has acted as a catalyst for this internal rebellion rather than a unifying force. By promising the total destruction of a nation of 90 million people, the leadership has created a moral crisis for the commanders on the ground. These officers are trained in the laws of armed conflict, and they are now witnessing a commander-in-chief who treats international defense treaties as optional while demanding their lives for a unilateral campaign. This tension has created a narrative vacuum that the administration is trying to fill with increasingly desperate and patriotic framing. We are now entering a phase where the American military is being managed for appearances rather than operational reality. The principle of civilian control is being tested in ways we haven't seen in the modern era. What is happening isn't a coup, but it is the military equivalent of a warning light being ignored at 80 miles per hour. Experienced officers are using the only channels they have left, leaks and unofficial statements, to warn that a ground invasion is a mission beyond their current capacity. Instead of listening, the administration is moving to replace those leaders. A military that replaces its senior leadership during a crisis for being insufficiently enthusiastic about an operation that the professionals consider unfeasible is a military in terminal decline. These departed officers are not political activists. They are career professionals who realize that the strategic objectives of 2026 have already failed to materialize. The financial cost has surpassed the $100 billion mark. And yet the strategic waterways remain contested, and the regional coalition has dissolved into thin air. Every day the friction continues. The gap between the official story and the battlefield truth grows wider. This institutional crisis reached a fever pitch in April 2026 with a series of moves that have sent shockwaves through the global defense community. High-level leadership shifts within the Pentagon are being reported, with veteran commanders abruptly being moved aside. This isn't just a routine personnel change. It is a calculated effort to reposition the hierarchy during a time of extreme strategic tension. When you replace seasoned combat veterans who have expressed operational caution with those more aligned with political directives in the middle of a conflict, you aren't just changing leadership, you are signaling that compliance now outweighs tactical reality on the ground. The timing of these leadership changes is particularly significant, occurring just as the 48-hour window for regional compliance has closed without result. While the official line claims total control and imminent stability, The reality on the ground is a stalemate that has pushed global energy prices to record highs and left thousands of personnel in the crosshairs of sophisticated missile batteries. The shift suggests a deep-seated fear within the executive branch that the existing military structure might resist orders for a full-scale ground operation, an operation many experts believe would be the single greatest strategic error in modern history. Adding to the tension is the dramatic erosion of the 2026 coalition. International partners have not only stepped back, they are now actively distancing themselves from the administration's escalating rhetoric. The threats to withdraw from long-standing defense treaties if allies don't join the fight have backfired, leaving the United States more isolated than it has been in decades. Even at home, the America First movement is showing signs of a major split. Prominent voices are warning that this hard slog is betraying the very promises of avoiding endless foreign entanglements. The disconnect between the cockpit and the command center has never been more visible. Ultimately, the most important war in any conflict is the war for the narrative, the reason that makes a soldier willing to face the unthinkable. In 2026, the administration assumed that military action would create its own justification, but that assumption has shattered against the reality of an unconvinced domestic force. You cannot sustain an expensive, undefined, and unpopular operation when the men and women expected to execute it believe the mission serves interests other than their own. History shows that when the ranks lose faith in the why, the how becomes impossible, regardless of the technological superiority of the equipment. We are tracking every dimension of this institutional friction, from the tactical standoffs in the Persian Gulf to the ideological shifts happening inside the halls of power. The mainstream coverage will give you the sanitized highlights of the latest deadlines, but we are here to provide the full, unvarnished picture of what this means for the future of the military. If you want to understand the real trajectory of this conflict before it hits the headlines, you need to stay ahead of the curve. Click the video on your screen now to see our deep dive into the specific defensive technologies currently neutralizing traditional air superiority. See you there.